In today's note, we're going to take a quick look at the three methods of charging. So this is just a summary of some of the past notes that we've looked at. So the first method is charging by friction, and charging by friction is when electric charges are transferred by a rubbing action or friction. So when we rub two objects together, we form a charge. And when this happens, the objects will gain or will have opposite charges. One object will gain electrons and be negative, and the other will lose electrons and become positive. So remember, this is where we looked at the electrostatic series. The ones at the bottom of the electrostatic series had a stronger hold on electrons, and they would pull the electrons from the other object. So we have a short little kind of video here so we can see two neutral objects rubbing together. The stronger one is taking the charge or taking the electrons, and then the other one that has the weaker hold or the weaker one is losing them. So the stronger one becomes negative because it gains electrons, and the weaker one becomes positive because it is losing electrons. The next method is charging by contact or charging by conduction. So this is when electric charges are transferred from one object to another because the objects touch each other. So this is a little different. Friction is where you have two neutral objects rubbing or two objects rubbing together. And then here we have charging by conduction where we have one object touching another and both objects will have the same type of charge. So that will be the result. Whereas friction, it was they would have opposite charges. Charging by conduction, they will have the same type of charge. So we see a negative object and a neutral object. We see them touch. We see the negative object push electrons into the neutral object, or they transfer over, and they end up with the same charge. So again, this is by conduction or by contact. And finally, the last one, charging by induction. So charging by induction is when electric charges are transferred without direct contact. So this is the one where they come close, but they don't touch. And the result will be two charges will have an opposite, or the two objects will have an opposite charge. And this is caused by what we called induced charge separation. So this was a separate note on induced charge separation, and we looked at grounding as well. So again, we have a negative object and a neutral object. They come close, but they don't touch. When the negative object comes close to the neutral object, as we see here, the negative charges repel the negative charges in the neutral object. They get pushed away. What happens then is that if you attach a ground, the electrons will travel down the ground, and when you remove it, those negative charges are now gone, leaving the object now positive. This could be the case in the other way. If we had a positive object moving close to a neutral object, the electrons would get pulled closer and then positive charges would be pushed away. And when we attach a ground, more negative charges would come up to help balance that. And then when you remove the ground, you would have a positive object instead, or a negative object. So those are a look at the three methods of charging. Again, just a quick summary of them.